Postpartum body image has been a huge teacher for me, and it's something that I continue to learn from because once you are a postpartum body, you are postpartum forever. Those changes, that transition to being postpartum, your body is different for your entire life. So I really don't buy the idea that we have to go back to our pre-pregnancy bodies because it is just physically impossible to do so because we are older, we are wiser, we have birthed babies, our bodies are fundamentally different. And welcome to the Coffee Witching Hour. So this is my new podcast that is all about yoga, birth, raising kind humans. And today we're diving into a really big topic. We're going to be talking about postpartum body image today. And this is a subject that I am really passionate about, that I have a lot of thoughts about, and I haven't really fully shared a lot of those thoughts in public spaces yet. So this is going to be a really big one, and it might take more than one episode to cover all of the things that I have to share. But without further ado, let's dive right into the topic. So postpartum body image. Whew. Okay, so where do I even begin? So this is a really big topic, but the bottom line that I want people to come home with is that there has been so much conditioning to be afraid of this transformation to the maiden state, to before becoming pregnant and having a baby, to the mother state, to having that expansive belly, to birthing a human, to all of the changes that are going to occur after that transition. And those changes are okay. Not only are they okay, but they are something to be respected, and they are something to be revered, and they're something to be honored for really the sacred experience that it is to be able to birth a human. And really transitioning into the postpartum period should be seen as nothing less than a miracle. To create life, to give life to a human, to birth a human, and to nourish a human is incredible. And all bodies who have done that, and even the bodies who do not do that, are worthy of respect and honor and love and adoration. So that's kind of the big picture of what I want to drive home. But a little bit about my own personal experience first, because the knowledge of the sacredness of the postpartum body has always been there with me, but I think it has taken really years and 2 babies to actually feel that in my body. So a little bit of history about me before I get into my own story with postpartum body image. I'm someone who has struggled with an eating disorder for years. So I ran competitively, track and cross country in college and in high school. And that was a culture which, if you were a competitive runner or are currently, you probably know, has a lot of issues with body image, because being thin is very closely tied to being fast. And once you do reach the college level of athletics, it really is something that is likely tied to your identity. It was for me, for being a runner and also having a very thin body. That was something that kind of defined me. And I never saw myself as being fat. I thought I was always very far from it, but I was terrified of gaining weight. I was so very tied to the weight that I had and wanting to even shave off more and more and more until I was literally like nothing. And it took me years to, I kind of always recognized that was a problem, but to recognize that actually that wasn't helping me as a runner. It was in the short term. It was allowing me to run faster because I was lighter, but a couple years into basically starving myself, I realized that this is not good for my body. and just started to feel inside that this was not sustainable and this was not something that I should be striving to do, because in the long run it was just going to hurt me. And so it took me years of unconditioning that conditioning that thin is good, that thin is fast, that being fast makes me worthy, and to realize that those were all just lies that I had grown to believe. That my worth was not tied to how quickly I could do a 5K or how many pounds I was, but that my worth was really something deep within me. And I think we're all familiar with that now, with the whole I am enough era. Like, I think we have all realized, or maybe not even realized inside, but been told that we are enough. So that's not a story that's unfamiliar to many of us, but really the enoughness was something that was very physical and very visceral to me, because for so many years I had truly felt that I was not enough because I couldn't, because I was always just that close to achieving the ideal weight, to achieving the ideal time, and not quite getting it. So going into pregnancy, I knew that body image would be something that would come up for me, because I had heard my whole life about the whole postpartum lie of just having to bounce back to your pre-pregnancy weight, and how so many people struggle to get the weight off, and how moms never return to their pre-pregnancy body, and how it's just horrible. That is the lie that I had been told my whole life and that I had come to believe, and I was a little bit scared about that transition in my own body for obvious reasons, because to that point I had always been thin, and I worried that after having a baby I would just be expansive and not look like myself again. And so during the entire pregnancy, my first pregnancy with Snoopy, it was something that always was kind of at the back of my mind. Thankfully, I had done so much work inside and so much unlearning of that conditioning to want to be thin and all of that, that I had just kind of learned to let go as much as I possibly could of any of that in the back of my mind, and just allow my body to do what it wanted to do, which was to gain weight and to grow a baby. That being said, I have heard a lot of people who have had eating disorders and then become pregnant have been incredibly triggered by the experience of being in an OBGYN's office and having to be weighed every single week. I know for me, that wasn't necessarily something that bothered me, seeing the numbers on the scale, but it was something that was kind of icky to me, that every single visit that I went to, the first thing that you did was get weighed. And that was kind of the entire conversation, was basically around our weight. And it was such a central piece of data to the OBs, how much we weighed, and even to the midwives. Even when I switched into midwifery care, it was like, okay, you're on track. Okay, you didn't quite gain enough this time. What's going on? And for me, I always struggled with gaining enough weight with both of my pregnancies. So it was always kind of shaming. I would say shaming, because that's what it was, for not quite gaining enough weight with either of those pregnancies. And that was something that during my first pregnancy, I was open with my OB before I switched into midwifery care about the fact that I had struggled with an eating disorder before. During my second pregnancy, I didn't even mention it, because I realized that just even the mention of that really places you under more of a magnifying glass. And there's already so much emphasis on the weight that it really, I felt, even having said that, was kind of a deterrent to, or just kind of brought up more feelings that it needed to. So yeah, so I was always someone who was not quite, I felt, able to gain as much weight as the OBs or the midwives wanted. And that was something that internally I did shame myself about, because I'm like, I'm eating all this food, I'm doing all these things, I'm resting, but I'm still exercising and trying to follow all of these standards, but I'm still not gaining the weight like they want me to. So it was almost like a reverse of my college days when I was just praised for being a low weight and just wanted to either maintain or even lose a little bit less weight. So it was an experience that was really eye-opening to me, like that even now, today, that we have all of this medical technology, but that we are still having our, I wouldn't say worth, but our progress defined by our weight during the entire pregnancy. And it's like there should be some more data points than that. Because I know for me, having had 2 kids now, I just grow small babies. Like my babies aren't going to be more than like 6 pounds full term. I'm a small person and I'm probably not going to be at the higher end of the weight gain. But I also know from hearing what others have had to say and from being a doula to bigger bodies that on the flip side, on the other end of the coin, people who are naturally a higher weight before becoming pregnant are really scrutinized during the entire pregnancy because of the weight. And I've been a doula to someone who was just literally just fat shamed in front of me during the birthing and during the prenatal visits, from what it sounded like. And there's the whole myth of having to give birth or having to be induced early because you're a certain weight and because they believe your baby is big and because they believe that your pelvis is too small for the baby to fit through. And that's really honestly just a myth that doctors tell because they've been trained to do so, but also for liability reasons, because if they believe that the baby is, quote, too big to fit out of the birthing person, there's more of a risk of C-section. Or C-section is not always what the doctors are afraid of, but there's more of a risk of a long labor that ends in a shoulder dystocia and that ends in a really traumatic birth. So that's why they kind of encourage people to either get induced or just have a C-section, when really what the research shows is that if you have, quote, a big baby, that those ultrasounds are not really accurate in predicting the baby's actual size, and that usually the people who are told to have a big baby are just big people anyways. And really what it is fat shaming, is telling people they can't birth a certain way because of their weight, essentially. So I know on the other side of the coin that weight is a really big thing. Like if you're gaining too much weight, it's, quote, not okay. If you're gaining not enough weight, it's, quote, not okay either. When there's just so much variation in normal. So the weight was a big thing that was on my mind for both of my pregnancies. And the other thing I hear people talk about a lot that I experienced a little bit, but I think I would have experienced it even more if I had not been pregnant during the pandemic for my first baby and really like moving and living on a farm and not seeing as many regular people, not being a regular like part of community during my second pregnancy. But the fact that people comment on bellies all the time, I only got a little bit of that, but I hear a lot of people are really upset because there should be no reason to comment on whether a person's belly is too big, too small, is like, looks like they're going to, quote, pop, or any of those comments, when we're already scrutinized so much for our weight during pregnancy, when it's already such a big thing that is on our mind, in addition to all of the nutrition guidelines, and in addition to all of the things you can and cannot do movement wise and day-to-day wise and all of that, just to be having those little grains of doubt put into your mind by complete strangers who are well-meaning, of course, but are just like, oh, your belly looks really small. Like, are you sure you're pregnant? That's actually something I got with my second baby before the belly started showing. So just to have those little comments slipped in by well-meaning strangers is just something that kind of brings up a lot of insecurities with people, and it did with me as well. But I feel like I said, I missed a lot of that because of the pandemic and because of the move. But nonetheless, those two things, the appearance of the belly and the scrutiny for the weight, were big things that were present during both of my pregnancies. Postpartum though, for me, honestly, I hear a lot of negative narratives, like I mentioned before, about feeling pressure to bounce back, feeling like you're never going to get your body back again, about feeling like it's going to take you 9 months, like 9 months in, 9 months out to get the baby weight off and all of that. But for me, honestly, it's like a narrative that I don't hear enough, but that I love my postpartum body. And maybe that's why it's taken me so long to make a podcast about this and to talk more about it on social media, because I feel like the other perspective is just so dominant about really being so tied to these capitalist standards that we have to get our bodies to be a certain way. But I honestly, after both pregnancies, even in the early squishy 4th trimester baby body stage, I've been, wow, just so impressed with this massive transformation that has just happened. The fact that I just had a baby in and now it's out, and the belly was like massive and now it's like still there but pretty small compared to that massive thing that I just had a couple of days ago. I've just been honestly in awe with the transformation of my body. The fact that it can go from 9 months pregnant one day to just having this baby out the next, and not being back to normal, but still being an intact human, like without any major scars or without my body falling apart or anything like that. It's just this feeling of complete and utter awe for the fact that I can birth a baby and can nourish a baby, can breastfeed a baby, all of these things that I do not in any way take for granted. I always had a fear growing up that I would struggle with infertility, and I didn't by some miracle, because I know so many do. And I just know that giving birth to a baby is no small feat. We should be so impressed with ourselves for our ability to do it. That being said, the feeling of having to, quote, get your body back is very much present. And I think anytime I've tried to talk to people about the feeling of being a foreigner in my body, or like just feeling like my body is so different after giving birth, I've always been met like, oh, don't worry, you'll get your body back, it'll just take 9 more months. Don't worry about it. And I've just been like, no, I actually like my body better now. That transition from maiden to mother is a big one that I can sense and feel and see in my own body. Like, I never really had hips, not big ones, before giving birth, and now I have these hips that have given birth. And I've never really had breasts my entire life, and then suddenly to just go through this transformation and now have breasts and realize what they are for, which is not for the male gaze, but for nourishing a human. Because I never really felt like I understood that before giving birth and before breastfeeding. I never really understood that breasts were anything other than sexualized. And I remember when I was a teenager being so flat-chested and just fantasizing about marrying a plastic surgeon because I would watch these terrible plastic surgery shows and being like, yeah, one day I'm definitely going to get breast implants. And thankfully that didn't last past like the time I was 18 or so. The desire to have a boob job, thankfully it wasn't one that was with me for a very long time. But I never thought that ever in my life I would have breasts. And now to just see a baby be fully nourished on that for 6 months, that to me is just so incredible that we are able to nourish humans. So to me, the journey of giving birth, of being pregnant for 9 months and then giving birth and then having this body that no longer houses a baby but nourishes a baby is, for me, it is just something that I am so in awe of in my own body, and with the fact that billions, literally billions of other people have done it, it's just so incredible to me. Now, I want to say with all of that, I'm very careful because I've had a history of eating disorder. Like, I am very, very careful to avoid the things that could trigger those feelings of low self-worth and those feelings of not being satisfied with the shape of my body. And I know when those feelings come up, and I'm very quick to just kind of acknowledge those feelings of basically of just my self-worth being tied to what I eat or to how thin my body is and those kinds of things. I'm very quick to kind of stop and reflect when I see those things come up, and to avoid altogether certain things that I know are too much for me. Like, for me, I will never run a race again. Like, I just don't think it's in my future. Like, I've been able to run marathons in a way that I felt was pretty healthy, the training cycle, and to not be tied to the time that I finish. And I was incredibly proud of myself for doing that. And I kind of feel like I don't really need to run marathons or ultras or even 5Ks or any of those things anymore. I'm very careful not to look at my pace when I run. I do still run just for pleasure. Really just for the feeling that it brings me, that endorphins kick that I get when I go out and do a 2-mile run with my dog. But I don't look at my pace. I try not to wear watches that show me my pace. And I do look at my weight, but I have no intention at all of wanting to be back at that weight that I was when I was a competitive runner. And so anytime that I get below a certain weight, I'm like, okay, need to eat more, need to focus more on nutrition, need to do all of these things. So I'm still very careful about keeping myself in this safe container where I avoid certain things, and when certain things come up, kind of give myself the space to acknowledge and work through those things. And just having dealt with body image issues and with low self-worth tied to the shape of my body and the size of my body and all of that for so long, I think that has been a really incredible teaching experience for postpartum, which is just a time when there are inevitably so many changes in the body. That being said, one incredibly surprising thing, it shouldn't be so surprising, but one surprising thing with postpartum that came up was the fact that I looked like 5 to 10 years older, like in my face, after having a baby both times. And I mean, this is kind of a common thing, but it's just the lack of sleep, I think. and the massive shift in hormones, going from having this big, thick, fluffy hair and the glow and all of that, to all of the hormones suddenly leaving the body and just looking tired and sleep deprived and all of those things. That was something that I experienced with both babies. And it was a bigger deal with my second baby because my second baby also came right before my 30th birthday, which is a really big, big birthday. And it's that transition into no longer being a young adult. Not that I was like a young adult at 29, but no longer being a young person, really. Realizing that all of the like pop songs and all of the entertainment and all of those things are not really about my age group anymore. They're now about younger people. And that I'm no longer the thing that capitalist beauty standards think of as, quote, hot or any of those things. That I'm like getting old now. Just that feeling of that really was magnified by that shift in hormones after postpartum, of looking at myself and being like, oh my God, like, is that a new wrinkle? Is that a new mole? Is that gray hair that's coming? What's happening to my body? Why do I look so old? Which of course is both the fact that I am turning 30 and the fact that, and because of that massive hormonal shift and because of the sleep deprivation in the early postpartum phase. So that was something that I felt was magnified during my second postpartum experience. And I don't have all of the answers to this yet. I am only 31, so I don't have the whole aging thing figured out, and it's something that I am going through with everyone who is my age as well. But it was really a surprising thing that I didn't expect to think so much of during postpartum, but it was something that was very present on my mind. And I would see older pictures of myself and be like, wow, my face really does not look like I'm 21 anymore. Is this what happens when you have a baby? Or is this just stress? Or yeah, I guess this is because I'm turning 30. And for me, like I said, I don't have any of this figured out yet. But it really brought up a lot of insecurities that I had not experienced before, but that really took me back to my teenage years, when I, as a teenager, just felt like I had to wear so much makeup, had to go out and buy new clothes all the time, and had to use all these cosmetics all the time. And when I turned 20 or so, and really it was like around 25 when this peaked, but I went through this whole era of just complete minimalism with makeup and cosmetics and all of that. And I think the entire decade of my 20s, I did not get a professional haircut. I was just cutting my own hair. For a long time, stopped wearing makeup altogether, was really in my yoga phase where I just was so minimalist on those aspects of self-care. When I started freelance writing, I was writing for some small companies. I was writing some organic deodorant articles, and then wrote so well, honestly, like wrote those articles with so much passion that I convinced myself that I shouldn't be wearing deodorant anymore. So for a while, I wasn't wearing even deodorant, like wasn't using soap, like, okay, so there were some issues with my hygiene for a little bit when I was returning from the PhD program and trying to kind of find my way again. But yeah, all of that is to say, I was incredibly minimalist with cosmetics for a very long time. And then during my second pregnancy, with the arrival of my 30th birthday coming, I suddenly was like, why don't I just spend the day giving myself a spa day, giving myself manicures and pedicures and buying some face masks and actually taking care of myself again, getting my hair cut, getting my hair done. Why don't I do these things that I know made me feel really good as a teenager? But why don't I do them instead of doing them to meet some capitalist beauty standards or to cater to the male gaze, which is what the experience was as a teenager, why don't I just do them for myself? Because it feels good and because it makes me feel good. So that was a big thing during my second postpartum experience. During the first, it wasn't such a big thing because it was still the pandemic and I didn't really have people to look nice for other than my husband, I guess. But during my second postpartum, it was really a big thing that was present on my mind. So after that fourth trimester, when I mostly was inside the house, mostly like not doing my makeup, not doing my makeup at all during that fourth trimester period where I was trying to stay in as much as I could and just wear baggy sweatpants and warm things and all of that. At the end of that, suddenly I was just like, let me start dressing up again and looking cute and doing all these things to make myself feel good. So that was a really big thing within my postpartum experience as well. So postpartum body image has been a huge, huge teacher for me, and it's something that I continue to learn from, because once you are a postpartum body, you are postpartum forever. Those changes, that transition to being postpartum, your body is different for your entire life. So I really don't buy the idea that we have to go back to our pre-pregnancy bodies, because it is just physically impossible to do so, because we are older, we are wiser, we have birthed babies, our bodies are fundamentally different. So all of that is to say that I think we should be honoring that transition from being young, pre-pregnant, to being older, wiser, postpartum, in ways that our society really doesn't seem to. I think we should see this process of birthing humans as what it is, which is sacred. And I think there should just be more talk, more conversation about the beauty of having a postpartum body. Now, for me, the transition from maiden to mother was one that was empowering, I think, truly empowering. The one that I still have fears around are the transition from maiden to crone, the older woman, like the grandma, which I like see inside of myself and I know will happen someday, and I'm not quite there yet, and I still am afraid because our society teaches us to be afraid of that transition. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, it's the three archetypes of women: maiden, mother, and crone. Maiden being the youngest, mother being what it is, the maternal aged person, and then crone being the older woman. And that is something obviously for another episode to get into, but it's something that is just in the back of my mind and that I have been sitting with a lot lately, because I'm not there yet, but I see it in the future, and I am just trying to find role models who are older than me to watch and follow and see go through that transition with grace and with self-acceptance and with joy, really. So that's what's on the horizon for me. Thank you so much for being here, for listening, for being present to all of my thoughts, feelings, emotions that I bring into these podcasts. I hope you enjoy it. I hope you get something out of it. Please do let me know what you'd like to hear in future episodes as well. And please do let me know if you have birthed a human, how it was for you, what you struggled with postpartum in terms of body image and other things as well, and what you're continuing to work on. I would love it if you would like this video if you are watching on YouTube, subscribe to my YouTube channel as well. If you are listening on Spotify, please rate me 5 stars and follow along with the podcast. Subscribe so that you don't miss anything. And if you'd like to support the creative work, I have a Patreon page that you are more than welcome to contribute to if you'd like to support this. So thank you so much for being here, and I will see you next time.